Hey guys, it's Danny. Alrighty, today we are going to discuss about watering orchids in the semi-hydroponic system. I will show you how I do it, but because things are a little simpler than you might think, this will not necessarily be a tutorial, but it will be a discussion and a clarification because, well, this setup pretty much revolutionizes orchid growing. So first of all, you might already know that we have orchids which prefer to dry out, orchids which prefer a more water retentive medium, orchids that you should water like so and like such, and that's all good in organic medium. And I myself have tutorials on how to water Cattleyas, Phalaenopsis, all of that down below in the description. All of these rules are really good and they're in place for a reason, but they absolutely do not apply to semi-hydroponics, not one bit. So before we move on, we need to completely forget whatever we knew about watering orchids in the past with organic medium. Doesn't mean the rules are not good and you shouldn't do them, it just means that they don't matter in semi-hydroponics. So today we will discuss about why they don't matter and why we can actually do certain things in semi-hydro. So that's why I wanted to make it as a discussion. Okay, so in essence, what does watering mean? Well, it means bringing water close enough to the orchid, enough to wet the root system. And that's about it. The fact that we did it in so many different ways, soaking the pot, letting water run through the pot, misting the roots, soaking mounds, or just hosing them down and so on, those were techniques that had nothing to do with the orchids themselves, I believe, but more to do with the medium. I came to the conclusion that many things we used to do with organic medium, we did them because of the medium, not because of the orchid. It's not the Cattleya that likes to dry out, no, it's the medium that likes to dry out. And it's not the orchid that doesn't like wet feet. No, it's the medium who doesn't like wet feet. Well, of course, semi-hydroponics only has one single type of medium. We cannot talk about what type of leca we're using. Theoretically, it's all the same. Yes, there are degrees of quality, but it is a clay, porous material that is round, and that's about it. It is inorganic. In essence, it is all the same. Therefore, there are things we don't need to worry about with this medium anymore. So first of all, we don't need to worry about how we water it. There is only one single way to water this pot, which I'm going to demonstrate right now. And that's it. This is the pretty much only way to water this orchid. As I was saying, the act of watering implies bringing water close enough to wet the root system. You can vary it, of course. If you don't like to water with a jug, you can water with a spray pump like I do, or you can water directly at the sink. But do you have to soak? No. Do you have to mist? No. Do you have to throw everything in a bucket? Absolutely not. This is all you need to do. And this is because, well, we're using leca, we're not using bark or organic medium. Let me explain. If you watch the tutorials that I linked to down below in the description, you might have noticed that I sometimes say you can soak the pot if it is bark, or you can just run water if it's sphagnum moss or sphagnum moss combination. And well, that's your answer. How we water by soaking, misting, running water has nothing to do with the orchid herself, has to do with the medium. Bark needs to be soaked because it doesn't really retain all that much water, and also it doesn't absorb it fast enough. And you might already know that Cattleyas like good air circulation and chunky bark medium, Phalaenopsis as well, and this like expression that we use, it only refers to the fact that they seem to do better, that's all. So whatever is in bark, you will have a good time with it if you soak it a little bit more, at least at the beginning, and especially if you grow orchids in a pretty dry or pretty warm environment. How do we water mounds? Well, if you're a nursery, you might shower them with the sprinklers or with your irrigation system once or a few times a day. If you're a home grower, you might just dump them into a bucket. I know I did. And let them soak, let the roots accumulate the water, all in the purpose of hydrating the orchid as best as possible. But yet again, it refers to the mount, not the orchid. Vanda orchids. Now this is tricky. If they're bare-rooted, they do benefit from soaks. Whether they're 10-minute soaks or a few hours long soaks, no matter what, you need to let the Vanda stay in contact with water for enough time to get properly hydrated. It is a technique. And in this case, it doesn't have to do with the type of medium we're using, but with the lack of of medium. There's nothing there to help her to retain that water and deliver it to the roots later, which is the whole point of medium actually. So even with the bare-rooted orchids or even with the mounted rooted orchids, there is still the question of how do we provide this water, how do we water it, and so on. Now, it's easy to imagine that in semi-hydroponics, since we're dealing with the same setup for everybody and the same medium for everybody, there shall only be one type of watering for everybody. And this is the one that I just showed you. For everybody, no exception. Semi-hydroponic setups doesn't require you to mist anything unless you want to overdo it and mist some aerial roots. There is no need for soaking either because we do have a reservoir which maintains water after watering. So the leca will soak up the water here. There is no need to actually soak the entire pot. Even the top will remain moist. It will drag the water from the reservoir. With a semi-hydroponic pot, you basically need to refer to the simplest, most easiest and basic way of watering. Put water in the pot, that's it. And P.S. I'm not referring here to flushes and all of that, which take into account fertilizer buildup, blah blah blah. I'm just referring to watering here. So that's all you need to do. And Danny, does this work for all orchids? Yes. Pretty much, with no exception. It works beautifully for cattleyas, which need to dry out. They actually never dry out for me. It works with epidendrums, with brassavolas, with encyclias, the phalaenopsis, the bulbophyllum, pretty much all epiphytic orchids and semi-terrestrials that you can imagine. So how did we end up here from having so many rules about orchids not liking wet feet, which is the total opposite of this reservoir, orchids liking to dry out, liking to be soaked, liking to be sprayed? And we're dealing with so different orchids. We have Phalaenopsis, Miltoniopsis, Nellie Eiler, Engracum, Cattleya, Bulbophyllum, Masdevallia, Oncidiums, Dendrobiums, all are in semi-hydroponics. They're all watered in the same way. I make no difference in between them. They're all watered at the same time. I don't care if that reservoir is empty or not. How can this be? Why does this setup absolutely doesn't obey the rules of watering orchids? Let's explain it. I told you in the beginning that the rules of watering orchids that you know need to be forgotten if you want to properly water orchids in semi-hydroponics. Applying those rules to semi-hydro will lead to disaster. You want your orchid not to have wet feet, then you need to eliminate the reservoir. Therefore, you're not doing semi-hydro, are you? You want the orchid to be soaked? Well, you can soak it. There's nobody stopping you. However, you're not going to benefit from the functionality of semi-hydro and the easy life of semi-hydro. And it all has to do with the material. Number one, orchids don't like to have wet feet. No, the medium doesn't like to have wet feet. At the bottom, usually water collects more due to gravity. Generally, bark cannot absorb the water at the bottom directed to the top, such as leca. Therefore, what happens is that a layer at the bottom starts to decompose a little faster because, yes, organic medium decomposes. It is organic. The more water you provide to that medium, the faster it decomposes. Bacteria and microbes and fungi, they all depend on moisture to do what they're supposed to do. You offer that moisture all the time, they will do what they have to do faster. Therefore, there will be a layer that will decompose faster at the bottom. This means that it will change its structure. Bark, in time as it decomposes, becomes this soft and mushy material. Wherever it decomposes faster, that's where it becomes more mushy. What happens to the root system? Well, first of all, it is suffocated because the air pockets disappear completely. Second, it starts to deal with more and more acidic environments. As it decomposes, organic medium releases CO2, which makes the environment more acidic. 3, it starts to remain out of oxygen. Bacteria and microbes and fungi, some of them rely on oxygen and consume oxygen. The bigger the colony you have, the more consumption of oxygen. So the root starts to get bombarded with all of these factors all at once. Only here. Well, if the root starts to die here, it will continue to die upwards. It can even begin to develop some fungal diseases and issues. And therefore, we will end up with some root rot. So in the end, as you can see, it's not the orchid who hates to have wet feet, it's the orchid in organic medium who will suffer from wet feet. In semi-hydroponics, we rely on wet feet. We rely on this reservoir, which yes, goes through drying out as well. It doesn't necessarily always stay full. Sometimes it doesn't have to go all the way down for us to refill it. It depends on the mood, to be quite honest with you. And when I want to water, because yes, some orchids dry out faster. Do I care about the orchids which are not dry yet? No, I water everything at once because I want to have an easy life, and it doesn't matter. So that's the issue with the wet feet. So what's the issue with letting orchids dry out? Cattleyas are notorious for letting them dry out in between waterings. There are AOS articles on the matter. Well, you kind of need to forget about that when you're watering in semi-hydroponics. My cattleyas, I can let them dry out because they can tolerate it, but at the same time, I can water as such as to never let them dry out, and it doesn't really matter. So let's explain that as well. You might already know cattleyas, and maybe other orchids as well, they tend to give up their roots pretty fast, right? If their root gets a little bit damaged, sometimes it can completely die off. Cattleyas are one of those orchids which have sensitive roots. As I was saying, organic medium tends to decompose faster the more moist you keep it. Since cattleyas do come from pretty droughty environments as it is, they have adapted to tolerate this drought. However though, they will not mind a period of nice heavy rain. It's really easy for cattleya orchids to get suffocated by organic medium decomposing or have their roots being damaged by the medium that is breaking down. If we let the medium dry out, we eliminate part of the decomposition colony and microbes. They cannot function nor live if the environment is bone dry. They can go into this dormant state and they will reactivate whenever the medium becomes wet. If we maintain the medium wet all the time, they will have nothing to interrupt them from decomposing that medium. If we maintain the medium such as to have drought periods in between, we simply delay the inevitable, which is the decomposition of the medium. And for cattleyas, this works great. And cattleyas are not the only ones who need to dry out in organic medium. In gracums or whatever vendaceous orchids you have, like neophoenicias or other things, whatever is cattleya related theoretically should dry out. But in semi-hydro, this never happens, unless I'm a little bit too lazy that day. In a semi-hydroponic system, basically things can sit wet at all times. And it doesn't matter, not for cattleyas, not for angraecums, not for anything. I dare say vandas can work in semi-hydros in certain conditions, but it's very not functional when it comes to vandas. And you want to know why this is? Simple. Leca does not decompose, it doesn't bruise roots, it doesn't create a too acidic environment for the root, it doesn't compact, it doesn't suffocate, it does not promote or support bacterial or microbial or fungal activity. Now, what I just told you, of course, comes from my experience and my deductions. You kind of need to take it with a grain of salt. It's nothing scientific because I'm not a scientist, I do know a thing or two, but it's not necessarily the absolute truth. Based on what I see happening with my orchids, I try to explain things, and this is the best explanation that I have found so far. This is why in many of my videos I told you that you can grow your orchids in whatever type of medium you prefer, as long as that medium provides air, water, and of course the ratio between them. Because the secret to leca and to semi-hydroponics is that no matter how wet the system is, it is also airier than pretty much any medium you can imagine except the mounted orchid setup or the bare-rooted setup, which goes to the extreme of the air. Due to a more mathematical issue, which you have linked down below, if you place spheres of approximately the same size, no matter what the volume, you will always have a certain percentage of air, because spheres being round, they will retain air pockets, no matter what. In a semi-hydroponic pot, you can have about 30% of it air. The only worry with the system is the growth of roots, therefore it needs, or rather orchids need to be up potted every once in a while, but they don't need to really go through that rough repot. And pretty much that is the secret of semi-hydroponics: water and air. And there's a heck of a lot of air and a heck of a lot of water. And I do believe that is the dream. I do believe this is how you promote constant growth, how you promote proper hydration at all times, and a stress-free life when it comes to disturbing roots. So the issue that semi-hydroponics tried to solve was, how do we provide a lot of air and a lot of water both at the same time? And I dare say it succeeded. Therefore, everything else doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter how often you water, as long as you maintain the orchid hydrated. It doesn't really matter how much air you provide. You're always going to provide roughly the same percentage of air no matter what. You don't need to worry about root rot or compacting medium. You don't need to worry about the wet feet situation. There are other things you should worry about, like temperature, or regularly flushing the pot if you don't flush it when you water, and so on. Those are details. But pretty much for the basic watering, there is only one way and one way only to water all of these orchids, and you can do so whenever it is that you please to do so, as long as you're not promoting crown rot and stuff of the sort. So yeah, don't water from above. Many problems of the organic medium have been solved, and watering orchids in this system is nothing magical or fantastic or that deserves 5 videos. There is no difference between the Cattleya and the Phalaenopsis and the Masdevallia when it comes to watering, except that if I'm lazy, I can let a Phalaenopsis or a Cattleya without water one more day, a Masdevallia not so much. But if I wanted to, I can definitely water the Cattleya and the Phalaenopsis even if they're still wet, and no harm will come upon them. So it's not very functional for the video maker on YouTube, right? It's one less topic that I cannot talk about in multiple videos and explain. And as Ray, who invented the system, says, it creates uniformity across the board. No more, when do I need to water the orchid? Or how do I need to let it dry out? Do I need to do this and that? No, just water it. Just put water in that pot. That's all you need to do with semi-hydro. It can be good for beginners or for people who are simply frustrated with how do you water this orchid. So in my opinion, it makes life easier. And for the main part, I do try to water everybody at once. There are certain days that might be warmer. The smaller pots, they might get dry a little faster. Yeah, that's that. It doesn't happen all the time. But for the main part, I water everybody at once, and I don't care if the pot is still wet. And that, I have to say, is a load off my mind. And I think that's about it with the discussion. Hope you managed to stay through the end. It was something that I needed to adjust to as well, but not now, pretty much 2 years ago when I switched to ceramics and clay medium in general. Things are just so much different in inorganic medium, and a lot of the rules that you grow up with, right? They don't apply anymore, and it's hard to get rid of them when the AOS tells you to let that Cattleya dry out, and you don't know what to do, and you just start to experiment and hope for the best and look at the Cattleya roots every day and see if they're dead, and surprise surprise, they're not dead. And it works. And yes, I said it, I think a few years ago when I was talking about root rot. If you maintain an orchid wet but airy at the same time, I suspect you will never have root rot. But to actually put that in practice, it's scarier, at least at first, because we're just so used to those rules. But hey, everything has a beginning, each game has its own rules, and the rules of semi-hydro just happen to be extremely simple. So alrighty guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you've enjoyed it, hope you've enjoyed this casual Sunday. You know the drill. If you did enjoy it, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye!